My wife's dad, the boss, fired me after I interviewed with other companies, even though he had denied me a raise for 5 consecutive years. I consider this disloyal, he said, revoking my building access on the spot. I smiled, wished him well, and left without causing a scene. 2 days later, he received an email from, you know that feeling when you walk into a room and something's just off? Yeah, that's exactly what hit me the second I stepped into Raymond Ellis's corner office that Tuesday morning. The guy's got this massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, and enough leather-bound books to make you think he actually reads something other than golf magazines. But today, something was different. The usual fake smile was nowhere to be found. My name's Logan Rivers, and I'd been busting my ass at Graypoint Strategies for 5 solid years. Senior analyst, they called me, though honestly, I was doing way more than analyzing anything. I was the guy who stayed until 9 p.m. fixing other people's screw-ups, the one who smooth-talked angry clients back from the edge, and yeah, the one who brought in more revenue than half the so-called VPs combined. And Raymond Ellis? He's my father-in-law, Claire's dad, and the CEO who'd been dangling that promotion carrot in front of me like I was some kind of corporate donkey. Sit down, Logan, he said, and man, his voice had this edge to it that made my stomach drop. No, good morning. No, how's Claire? None of that usual small talk bullcrap. Just straight to business, and not the good kind. I settled into that uncomfortable chair across from his desk. You know the type, designed to make you feel small while the big shot looms over you from his throne. Raymond was shuffling through some papers, taking his sweet time, probably trying to build up the drama. Classic power move. I'd seen him pull this routine with suppliers and junior staff, but never with me. We were family, right? Or at least I thought we were. I got an interesting phone call yesterday, he finally said, still not looking up from whatever he was pretending to read. From Marcus Webb over at Hartfield and Associates. My blood went cold. Marcus was the hiring manager I'd met with the week before. The interview I thought I'd kept under wraps. The one I'd scheduled during my lunch break because, hell, a guy's gotta have options when his father-in-law keeps shooting down his raise requests year after year. Is that so? I managed to keep my voice steady, but inside I was already connecting the dots. This town's business community is smaller than people think, and gossip travels faster than wildfire. Raymond finally looked up, and those cold gray eyes of his, the same ones Claire inherited, though hers actually had warmth in them, were staring right through me. He mentioned you'd interviewed for their senior director position. Funny thing is, you never mentioned anything to me about being unhappy here. Here we go. I could feel the lecture coming, the whole family loyalty speech he'd probably been rehearsing since he hung up with Marcus. But I wasn't some fresh college grad anymore. I was 32 years old, had a mortgage, and was tired of watching less qualified guys get promoted while I got patted on the head and told to wait my turn. I wasn't aware I needed permission to explore my options, I said, keeping it professional even though part of me wanted to remind him about the 5, count 'em, 5, times he'd denied my raise requests. The last one just 3 weeks ago, with the same tired excuse about tightening our belts, while he was showing off photos of his new boat to anyone who'd listen. Options. Raymond leaned back in his chair, and I could practically see the wheels turning. After everything this company has done for you? After I personally vouched for you when you were just some guy dating my daughter? That stung, and he knew it would. Yeah, I'd started at Graypoint as Claire's boyfriend, but I'd earned my place here. Every late night, every saved client relationship, every innovative strategy that had kept us competitive, that was all me. Not daddy's connections, not family favors. Me. I've given this company 5 years of my life, I said, and I could hear my voice getting tighter. I've exceeded every performance metric, brought in millions in new business, and mentored half the junior staff. And what do I have to show for it? You have a steady job, good benefits, and the same salary I started with, adjusted for inflation, which means I'm actually making less now than when I began. The words came out harder than I intended, but screw it. If we were having this conversation, we might as well have it for real. Raymond's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by family. In his world, loyalty meant shutting up and accepting whatever scraps he threw your way. I consider this disloyal, he said, and those 5 words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because they hurt, but because they were so perfectly Raymond. Everything was about loyalty with him, Never about fairness or respect or actually taking care of the people who made his company run. Disloyal. I repeated, tasting the word. Is it disloyal to want to be compensated fairly for my work? Is it disloyal to seek opportunities for growth when those opportunities don't exist here? But Raymond was already reaching for his phone. Security? Yeah, I need someone up here to escort Logan Rivers out of the building. He hung up and opened his desk drawer, pulling out a manila envelope. Your final paycheck is being processed. You can pick up your personal items under supervision. Just like that. 5 years gone. No discussion, no negotiation, no chance to explain or defend myself. He slid my building access card across that massive desk like he was dealing a hand of poker. Your building access ends now, he said, not even bothering to look at me. You know what the crazy part was? I felt relieved. Like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had just been lifted off my shoulders. All those nights I'd gone home frustrated. All those times I'd bitten my tongue when less qualified people got promoted over me. All those fake smiles I'd plastered on during company meetings where Raymond praised everyone except the guy actually doing the work. I stood up, straightened my tie, and did something that probably surprised both of us. I smiled. Not a fake corporate smile, but a real one. The kind of smile you get when you realize you don't have to pretend anymore. Well, Raymond, I said, using his first name for the first time in years, I want to thank you for everything. I learned a lot here, and I wish you and Grey Point all the best. His eyebrows shot up. He'd probably expected me to argue, to beg, to grovel for my job back. But why would I? The man had just shown me exactly what he thought of 5 years of dedication and hard work. Security showed up, 2 guys I actually knew pretty well from all those late nights at the office. They looked embarrassed as hell, which made me feel a little better about the whole situation. Take your time cleaning out your desk, one of them said quietly as we walked to the elevator. No rush. The ride down felt like the longest and shortest elevator trip of my life. 47 floors, and with each one, I felt a little more free. By the time we reached my floor, I was actually looking forward to packing up my stuff. My desk was right where I'd left it that morning, covered with the usual chaos of reports, client files, and those little personal touches that make a workspace feel like home. The framed photo of Claire and me from our honeymoon in Italy. The little cactus she'd bought me as a joke about surviving in a hostile environment. My coffee mug with World's Okayest Analyst printed on it. A gag gift from the team that had somehow become my favorite. As I packed everything into the cardboard box security had provided, I couldn't help but think about all the moments that had led to this. The late nights fixing other people's mistakes. The times I'd saved client relationships that everyone else had written off. The strategies I'd developed that had become company standard practice. All of it fitting into one small box. Claire didn't even know yet. She was probably at her marketing job across town, completely unaware that her husband had just been fired by her father. That conversation was going to be fun. You ever notice how your whole life can fit into a cardboard box when push comes to shove? I'm standing here in the Grey Point parking garage, staring at this beat-up banker's box that's holding everything I accumulated over 5 years of what I thought was building a career. The security guards had been decent about it, gave me all the time I needed, didn't hover over my shoulder like I was going to steal office supplies or download client data onto a flash drive. Hell, Tommy even helped me carry the thing down to my car. The weight of the box wasn't the problem. I mean, we're talking about some picture frames, a couple of notebooks, my desk plant that somehow survived the fluorescent light wasteland of cubicle life, and a few other random pieces of office junk that seemed important at the time. Maybe 15 pounds, tops. But man, it felt like I was carrying a boulder. Not because of the physical weight, because of everything it represented. 5 years. 60 months. God knows how many late nights, weekend emails, and quick calls that turned into hour-long problem-solving sessions. I'd given Grey Point everything I had, and apparently all of it fit into a space smaller than a microwave box. That's a hell of a reality check right there. I popped my trunk and set the box inside, right next to my emergency roadside kit and the jumper cables I'd never actually used. The thing looked so small and pathetic sitting there, like a sad monument to wasted potential. I slammed the trunk shut maybe a little harder than necessary, the sound echoing through the concrete cavern of the parking garage. Before I got in the car, I took one last look up at the Grey Point building. 47 floors of steel and glass, reaching up into the cloudy Seattle sky like some kind of corporate monument. I used to feel proud walking into that lobby every morning, used to think I was part of something bigger than myself. Now it just looked like what it was. A big expensive box where rich guys got richer while the rest of us did the actual work. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 5 years helping build Raymond's empire, and now I was driving away with my career in a cardboard box that probably cost him about 50 cents. The math on that seemed pretty screwed up. My phone started buzzing before I even got out of the parking garage. Claire's ringtone. That Bruno Mars song she'd programmed in because she said it reminded her of our first dance. Under normal circumstances, hearing it would make me smile. Today, it made my stomach clench up like a fist. I hit the Bluetooth button on my steering wheel. "Hey, babe." "Logan." Her voice sounded shaky, confused. "Ray just called me. He said you resigned. What happened? Are you okay?" Of course Raymond had called her first. Probably wanted to get his version of events on the record before I had a chance to tell my side. Classic move from a guy who'd built his career on controlling the narrative. "He fired me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I merged onto I-5. Traffic was lighter than usual for a Tuesday afternoon, which was good because my hands were gripping the steering wheel hard enough to leave marks. Silence on the other end. Then I heard her take a shaky breath. "What? But why? What did you do?" "I took an interview," I said simply. "Last week, with Hartfield and Associates. Somehow word got back to your dad, and he decided that was grounds for immediate termination." But I could hear her struggling with this, trying to make sense of it. Claire had always been caught in the middle between me and her father, and I knew this was tearing her apart. "You didn't even get the raise?" "No." Again, those two words carried the weight of 5 years of disappointment. 5 years of being told I was valuable while being treated like I was replaceable. Another long pause. I could picture her sitting at her desk at the marketing firm, probably staring out her window at Elliott Bay, trying to process what this meant for us, for our plans, for the future we'd been building together. "I can't believe he did this," she finally whispered. "I mean, I can believe it, but—" "Logan, I'm so sorry." That's when it hit me, the real weight of what had happened. It wasn't just about losing my job or getting fired by my father-in-law. It was about the complete destruction of the professional identity I'd spent 5 years building. I'd been Logan Rivers, senior analyst at Graypoint Strategies. I'd had business cards with that title, a LinkedIn profile that talked about my achievements, a whole persona built around being this rising star in the consulting world. Now I was just Logan Rivers, unemployed guy with a cardboard box in his trunk. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though I was probably making better time than my normal commute. Every red light gave me more time to think, and thinking was the last thing I wanted to do right now. My brain kept cycling through all the what-ifs and should-haves. What if I'd handled the Ray's conversation differently? What if I'd been more discreet about the interview? Should I have seen this coming? But then I'd remember Raymond's face when he said the word disloyal, the cold dismissal in his voice, the way he'd slid my ID card across that desk like I was nothing more than a security risk. And I'd realized that none of those what-ifs mattered, because this was never really about the interview. This was about Raymond Ellis needing to remind everyone, including his own family, who was in charge. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let this break me. Yeah, getting fired sucked. Yeah, having it happen because I'd dared to explore other options was insulting as hell. But maybe, just maybe, this was exactly the kick in the ass I needed. I sat in the car for a few minutes after I turned off the engine, looking at our little house with its blue shutters and the garden Claire had been working on all summer. We'd bought this place 2 years ago, thinking it was the start of our permanent life together. A place to build a family, to put down roots, to create something lasting. The cardboard box was still in my trunk, but somehow it felt different now. Less like a monument to failure and more like, well, like the first step towards something new. 5 years of my life might fit in that box, but that didn't mean the next 5 years had to be small enough to fit in one too. Time to figure out what came next. Once I got inside the house, I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I went straight to my home office and opened the file cabinet drawer I'd labeled career stuff. Buried underneath tax documents and insurance papers was a manila folder that had been sitting there like a ticking time bomb. The tab read, "Raises denied," in my own handwriting. and just looking at it made my jaw clench. You know how some people keep photo albums or scrapbooks to remember the good times? Well, this was my scrapbook of professional disappointment, and I'd been adding to it religiously for 5 damn years. I pulled out the folder and spread everything across my desk like I was building a case for court. Which, in a way, I guess I was. A case against my own naivety for believing that hard work and loyalty actually meant something at Graypoint Strategies. The first document was from year 1, back when I still thought Raymond might actually be looking out for me. A performance review dated March 15th, 2020, with all those corporate buzzwords that make you feel good until you realize they don't come with a paycheck increase. Logan consistently exceeds expectations, it read. His analytical skills and client management abilities are exceptional for someone at his level. Exceptional for someone at his level. Even back then, the condescension was there, hiding behind the praise like a snake in the grass. Attached to that review was my formal request for a salary adjustment, a modest 15% increase that would have brought me up to market rate for someone with my qualifications and track record. Raymond's response, delivered via email 2 weeks later, was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. While we greatly appreciate your contributions, current market conditions require us to be conservative with compensation adjustments. We'll revisit this during the next review cycle. Year 2, same song, different verse. Another glowing performance review, another exceeds expectations, rating, another request for fair compensation. This time Raymond had the balls to cite budget constraints, while the company newsletter that same month featured a 2-page spread about Graypoint's record-breaking quarterly profits. The math didn't add up, but apparently my opinion on basic arithmetic wasn't welcome in the C-suite. I flipped through year 3's documents, feeling that familiar burn in my chest. This was when I'd started documenting everything obsessively, printing out emails, and saving performance metrics like I was building evidence for some future reckoning. Maybe subconsciously, I knew this day was coming. The performance review from that year was even more effusive in its praise. Logan has become an indispensable asset to our organization, Raymond had written. His leadership of the Morrison Industries account recovery saved the company an estimated $3.2 million in potential losses. Indispensable. That word should have come with a raise, a promotion, or at least a cost of living adjustment. Instead, it came with another rejection letter citing economic uncertainty and the need to maintain operational stability. Economic uncertainty. This from a guy who'd bought a 40-foot yacht that same summer and named it Graypoint Glory. I'd seen the pictures on his Facebook page, Raymond and his golf buddies sipping champagne on the deck, while I was working 60-hour weeks to maintain his operational stability. Year 4 was where the rejections started getting creative. While your performance continues to exceed expectations, we're implementing a company-wide salary freeze to ensure our competitive position in the market. A salary freeze that apparently didn't apply to executive bonuses or the VP position they'd created for Raymond's old fraternity brother who'd never worked a day in consulting before joining the company. I remember that rejection stinging more than the others because by then I'd started seeing the writing on the wall. I wasn't being held back because of budget constraints or market conditions. I was being held back because Raymond Ellis had figured out he could get premium work for bargain basement prices, and why mess with a good thing? The most recent rejection, just 3 weeks ago, was sitting right on top of the pile like a fresh wound. This time I'd come armed with market research, salary comparisons, and a detailed analysis of my contributions to the company's bottom line. I'd even calculated that the clients I'd personally brought in were generating over $12 million in annual revenue. Raymond's response had been his most dismissive yet. Logan, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to focus on team cohesion rather than patience. 5 years of patience, and the only thing that had risen was Raymond's bank account and his sense of entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text from Jared Martinez, one of the few people at Graypoint who'd always shot straight with me. Jared worked in legal and had a front row seat to all the company's behind-the-scenes drama. Man, this is messed up. You carried that company. I typed back. Apparently not enough. But even as I sent that response, another text was coming in from a number I didn't immediately recognize. When I opened it, my heart damn near stopped. Hi Logan, this is Kira Benson from VistaCore Innovations. I hope you remember me from our conversation last week. I know this might be unexpected timing, but would you be available to meet this Friday? The board reviewed your proposal, and they're very impressed. I think you'll want to hear what we have to discuss. Vistacore Innovations, the company I'd interviewed with the week before. Not Hartfield and Associates like Raymond had mentioned, which meant either he'd gotten his facts wrong, or there were multiple companies interested in poaching Graypoint's indispensable senior analyst. I stared at that text for a long time, reading it over and over like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. After 5 years of being told to wait, to be patient, to accept whatever scraps Raymond felt like throwing my way, someone else was actively pursuing me. The irony was almost laughable. Raymond had fired me for being disloyal, because I dared to explore other options. But maybe the real disloyalty had been his 5 years of stringing me along with empty promises while he counted the money I was making for him. I looked back at the folder spread across my desk, 5 years of documented disappointment and broken promises. Then I looked at Kira's text again. Yes, I typed back. Friday works perfectly. What time? The response came back almost immediately, 2 p.m. I think you're going to like what we have to offer. For the first time since walking out of Raymond's office, I smiled. A real smile, not the fake corporate version I'd been wearing like a mask for the past 5 years. Maybe getting fired was the best thing that could have happened to me. Friday morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror trying to decide between the navy blue tie or the burgundy one. Funny how getting fired can make you second-guess everything, even stuff as simple as picking out a tie. 3 days ago, I would have grabbed whichever one was closest and called it good. Today, everything felt like it mattered more. I went with the burgundy. Claire always said it brought out my eyes. And hell, I figured I could use all the confidence I could get. The drive downtown to Vistacore's offices gave me plenty of time to think, maybe too much time. My brain kept cycling between excitement and terror, like I was on some kind of emotional roller coaster that wouldn't stop long enough to let me off. 1 minute, I was imagining myself in a corner office with actual decision-making authority. The next, I was wondering if this whole thing was just a courtesy meeting before they told me thanks, but no thanks. Vistacore's building was everything Graypoint's wasn't. Where Raymond's place was all dark wood and intimidating marble, designed to make you feel small. This place was bright, modern, and somehow welcoming. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in actual sunlight. The lobby had comfortable seating that looked like people might actually use it, and the receptionist smiled like she meant it instead of like it was part of her job description. "Mr. Rivers? Ms. Benson is expecting you," she said, gesturing toward a bank of elevators that looked like they belonged in a spaceship rather than an office building. 23rd floor, suite 2340. The elevator ride up was smooth and quiet, nothing like the ancient, groaning death trap at Graypoint that sounded like it might give up the ghost between floors. Through the glass walls, I could see people actually collaborating, having animated discussions around whiteboards covered in colorful diagrams and charts. It looked like the kind of place where ideas mattered more than hierarchy. Kira Benson met me at the elevator herself, which threw me for a loop. At Graypoint, executives like her would have sent an assistant to collect me and deliver me to the appropriate conference room like a package. But here she was, extending her hand with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Logan, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her handshake firm but not trying to prove anything. "I hope the drive wasn't too bad." Kira was probably in her early 40s, with short auburn hair and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're good at what you do without needing to prove it to everyone in the room. She was wearing a sharp gray suit that looked expensive but not flashy, and when she walked, people nodded respectfully without looking intimidated. "Traffic wasn't too crazy," I said, following her down a hallway lined with modern art and actual plants, not the plastic nonsense that decorated Graypoint's sterile corridors. "Good, good. Listen, I know this week has been eventful for you," she said, and I appreciated that she didn't dance around the elephant in the room. "I hope you know that what happened at Graypoint has nothing to do with how we see your value." That stopped me in my tracks. Word traveled fast in Seattle's business community, but I hadn't expected it to travel that fast. "News gets around," she said, reading my expression. "Small world, smaller industry." But honestly, Logan, what I heard only reinforced what I already knew about you from our interview. She led me into a conference room that had one wall entirely made of glass. offering a stunning view of Elliott Bay and the Olympics beyond. The table was a sleek piece of polished wood that probably cost more than my car, but somehow it didn't feel ostentatious. It felt functional, like a tool designed to get work done rather than impress visitors. "Can I get you anything? Coffee, water, something stronger?" Kira asked with a wink. "I know it's been a rough week." "Coffee would be great," I said, settling into a chair that was actually comfortable instead of the medieval torture devices Raymond preferred for his meetings. While Kira poured coffee from a machine that looked like it belonged in a high-end cafe, I tried to calm my nerves and focus on why I was here. This wasn't about what had happened at Grey Point. This was about what could happen next. "So," Kira said, sliding a steaming mug across the table, "let's talk about your future." She opened a leather portfolio and pulled out a document that made my heart skip a beat. Official letterhead, multiple pages, the kind of formal presentation that meant serious business. "Logan, I'll cut to the chase because I think you've had enough corporate BS to last a lifetime," she said, leaning forward slightly. "We reviewed your proposal from last week, the strategy framework you outlined for expanding into the Pacific Northwest market. It was brilliant, thorough, innovative, and exactly the kind of thinking we need here." I felt my chest tighten with something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine professional validation from someone who wasn't related to my wife. "The board met Wednesday night," Kira continued, "and they asked me to make you an offer. Not for a senior analyst position, not for some middle management role where you'll spend the next 5 years waiting for someone to retire. We want to offer you the position of Director of Global Accounts." Director? I'd been dreaming about a title like that for 5 years, and Raymond had made it clear it was never going to happen at Grey Point. "Not for me, anyway. You'd be leading your own team," Kira said, sliding the offer letter across the table. 7 direct reports to start, with room to grow as we expand. You'd have full authority over account strategy, client relationships, and budget allocation for your division. My hands were actually shaking as I picked up the document. The first page was all the standard legal language, but the second page, holy shit. The salary number jumped off the page like it was printed in neon. Nearly double what I'd been making at Grey Point. Not just double what I'd been asking for in those rejected raise requests. Double what I'd actually been earning. "I know it's a big number," Kira said, watching my reaction. "But you're not being overpaid, Logan. You were being underappreciated." I had to read the figure 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Base salary, performance bonuses, stock options, health benefits that actually covered things, for weeks of vacation that I was apparently expected to take rather than let accumulate indefinitely. "This is," I started, then stopped. I'd been about to say generous, but that wasn't the right word. Generous implied charity, and this wasn't charity. This was recognition. This was what I was actually worth in the marketplace. "I'm honored," I finally managed, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Truly honored that you'd consider me for this role." Kira smiled, and there was something almost maternal in her expression. "Logan, I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of talented people get ground down by companies that didn't value them properly. When I see someone with your skills and drive, someone who's been held back for no good reason, it's not just good business to make them an offer. It's the right thing to do." She leaned back in her chair, giving me space to process what I was looking at. "Take the weekend to think about it," she said. "Talk it over with Claire. But I hope you'll say yes, because I think we could build something amazing together." I looked out at the view of Elliott Bay, then back at the offer letter, then at Kira's expectant face. For the first time in 5 years, someone was betting on me instead of betting against me. "I don't need the weekend," I said. "Yes, absolutely yes." I floated through the rest of Friday like I was walking on air. Signed the offer letter right there in Kira's office, shook hands on a start date 2 weeks out, and drove home with the kind of stupid grin on my face that probably made other drivers think I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was, but it was the good kind. The kind where your whole world shifts and suddenly everything that seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Claire's car was already in the driveway when I got home, which meant she'd left work early. That could be good or bad, depending on how her dad had spun the whole situation. I found her in the kitchen, stress cooking, which for Claire meant making enough food to feed a small army. The counter was covered with ingredients for what looked like lasagna, garlic bread, and some kind of elaborate salad that required more chopping than a Benihana show. "Hey," I said, loosening my tie as I walked up behind her. Smells amazing in here. She didn't turn around immediately, just kept dicing tomatoes with the kind of precision that meant she was working through some serious emotions. How did it go? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Better than I could have imagined, I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. Claire, they offered me a director position, director of global accounts, with my own team and everything. That got her attention. She set down the knife and turned to face me, and I could see the relief and pride fighting with something else in her expression. Worry maybe, or guilt. Logan, that's incredible, she said, and she meant it. But then her face fell a little. Why didn't you tell me you were applying elsewhere? There it was. The conversation I'd been dreading but knew we had to have. I leaned against the counter, trying to figure out how to explain 5 years of frustration without making her feel like she had to choose between me and her family. Because every time I brought up leaving Gray Point, you said your father would come around, I said gently. You always asked me to give him more time, to be patient, to trust that he'd do the right thing eventually. Claire's shoulders sagged a little. I really believed that, she said quietly. I thought because you were family, he'd take care of you. I know you did, babe, and I wanted to believe it too. I reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. But after 5 years of the same excuses, I had to start looking out for myself. For us. She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. Claire had always been caught between two worlds, the corporate dynasty her father had built and the life she was trying to build with me. Most of the time, she navigated that balance gracefully, but situations like this made it impossible to keep everyone happy. He told the family you betrayed him, she said, and there was an edge of anger in her voice that I didn't think was directed at me. At dinner Wednesday night, he made this whole speech about loyalty and family values. Said you'd stabbed him in the back after everything he'd done for you. I felt my jaw clench. Of course, Raymond had gotten to the family first, spinning the narrative to make himself look like the victim. Classic narcissist move. Hurt someone, then play the wounded party when they have the audacity to respond. What did you say? I asked. Nothing, Claire admitted. I should have stood up for you, but I was so shocked and confused. I didn't know what had really happened, and everyone was looking at me like I should have some kind of explanation. You don't owe them an explanation for my decisions, I said firmly. This isn't about you, Claire. This is between me and your dad. But even as I said it, we both knew that wasn't entirely true. In a family like the Elises, everything was political, and wives were expected to keep their husbands in line. The fact that I'd gone rogue reflected poorly on Claire's ability to manage the situation, at least in Raymond's twisted worldview. He said you left with client files, Claire said suddenly, like she'd just remembered something important. Said security was doing an investigation. I actually laughed at that one. Yeah, I left with my coffee mug and a succulent plant. Real dangerous stuff. Your dad's grasping at straws, trying to justify firing me for exploring my options. My phone buzzed with a text, and when I glanced at it, I saw it was from Ryan, Claire's younger brother and Raymond's golden child. Ryan had always been decent to me, probably because he was secure enough in his position as heir apparent that he didn't see me as a threat. He's panicking, the text read. Said you left with client files. Security's checking. This is insane, man. I showed the text to Claire, and she rolled her eyes. Of course he's panicking. You probably handled half his major accounts personally. More than half, I said, then immediately regretted it. The last thing I wanted was to sound like I was bragging or trying to hurt Raymond's business. But it was the truth. I'd been carrying more than my share of the load for years. I texted Ryan back. Let him panic. I left with my coffee mug and a succulent plant. Nothing else. The response came immediately. LOL. Dad's lost his mind. Everyone knows you're the most honest guy at the company. Sorry this happened. That actually made me feel a little better. If Raymond's own son thought the whole thing was ridiculous, maybe the rest of the family would see through the bullshit too. You know what the crazy part is? Claire said, leaning against the stove. I've been defending him for years, making excuses for why he wouldn't promote you or give you raises. But watching him do this, it's like I'm seeing him clearly for the first time. He's your dad, I said. You're supposed to see the best in him. But I'm your wife, she shot back. I'm supposed to have your back too. And I haven't been doing that. I walked over and pulled her into a hug, feeling some of the tension leave her body as she melted against me. "You've been in an impossible position," I said. "I never wanted you to have to choose sides." "Well, I'm choosing now," she said, her voice muffled against my chest. "Team Logan all the way." We stood there for a while, holding each other in our kitchen that smelled like garlic and oregano, and for the first time in days, I felt like we were going to be okay. More than okay, actually. We were going to be better than we'd been in years, because now we didn't have to pretend that working for Raymond was sustainable or healthy. "So tell me about this new job," Claire said, pulling back to look at me. "Director sounds pretty impressive." "It is impressive," I said, grinning. "And the salary." I told her the number, and her eyes went wide. "Holy shit, Logan. That's incredible, right? Turns out I was worth more than Raymond was willing to pay. A lot more." Claire shook her head, and I could see the anger building behind her eyes. 5 years. 5 years he strung you along while you were worth this much the whole time. "Hey," I said, taking her face in my hands. "Don't be angry. Be happy. This is the best thing that could have happened to us." She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her since this whole mess started. "You're right. This is amazing. I'm proud of you." Later that evening, as we sat down to eat the feast she'd prepared, my phone rang. Raymond's name appeared on the screen, and Claire and I looked at each other across the table. "Don't answer it," she said. "Whatever he wants, it can wait." I hit decline and set the phone aside. For the first time in 5 years, Raymond Ellis would have to wait for my attention instead of the other way around. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. Thursday morning started like any other day in my new unemployed life. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my pajamas, laptop open, coffee getting cold while I updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect my shiny new title at VistaCore. It felt surreal typing Director of Global Accounts after 5 years of being stuck in analyst purgatory, but there it was in black and white. Proof that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Claire had already left for work, kissing me goodbye with a smile that told me she was finally starting to believe this whole mess might actually work out in our favor. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing by outside. Peaceful even. The kind of morning that makes you think maybe unemployment isn't the worst thing in the world when you've got a guaranteed job waiting for you in 10 days. I was debating whether to make another pot of coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb at Hartfield & Associates. The guy who'd unknowingly started this whole chain of events by mentioning my interview to someone who mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to Raymond. "Just heard what happened at Gray Point. That's messed up, man. Hope you landed on your feet." Before I could respond, another text came in from Sarah Chan, a former Gray Point colleague who'd jumped ship about 6 months ago for a better opportunity. "Holy shit, Logan. Word is Raymond's having an absolute meltdown. What did you do?" That got my attention. I typed back. "Nothing. Just got fired for taking an interview." "What? Check your email. Something big is going down." I opened my personal Gmail, scanning through the usual spam and newsletters, but nothing jumped out. The original email was sent from VistaCore's corporate communications team to Raymond Ellis personally, with CCs to the entire Gray Point executive team. My heart started pounding before I even read the first line, because I had a pretty good idea what this was about. "Dear Mr. Ellis," it began, and I could practically feel the polite professionalism dripping off every word. "We hope this message finds you well. After careful consideration and thorough review of our current vendor relationships, VistaCore Innovations has decided to terminate our consulting contract with Gray Point Strategies, effective immediately." Holy shit. I read that line 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. VistaCore, the company that had just offered me a director position, was pulling their business from Gray Point. The same VistaCore that represented one of Raymond's biggest accounts. The same VistaCore that generated somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 million in annual revenue for Gray Point. This decision was not made lightly. The email continued, and we want to emphasize that it reflects no dissatisfaction with the quality of work performed by Gray Point's team members, many of whom have provided exceptional service over the years. Even in their breakup email, they were classier than Raymond had been when he fired me. No accusations, no drama, just professional courtesy and respect for the people who'd actually done the work. However, recent organizational changes at Gray Point have caused us to reassess our partnership priorities and strategic alignment. We believe this change will better serve Vistacor's long-term objectives and values. Recent organizational changes. That was corporate speak for, "We heard you fired Logan Rivers like an asshole, and we don't do business with companies that treat good people like garbage." The email went on to outline the transition timeline, the return of confidential materials, and all the other legal necessities that come with ending a major business relationship. But the key message was clear. Vistacor was done with Graypoint, and they weren't sugarcoating why. My phone rang immediately. Sarah's name on the caller ID. "Did you read it?" she asked before I could even say hello. "Just finished," I said, still staring at the screen like the words might rearrange themselves. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. $18 million. Try 22 million, she corrected. That's what they were projecting for next year with the expansion project. "Logan, this is nuclear. Raymond is absolutely losing his mind." I felt a weird mix of emotions washing over me. Part of me was thrilled that Raymond was finally facing consequences for his actions. Part of me felt guilty that other people at Graypoint, good people who had nothing to do with this mess, were going to suffer because of what he'd done. And part of me was just stunned that Vistacor had taken such a dramatic step. "I need to be clear about something," I said to Sarah. "I had nothing to do with this decision. I didn't ask them to pull their business, didn't even hint that they should. This was entirely their call." "Logan, relax. Nobody thinks you orchestrated this. But everybody knows you were the primary contact on that account for the past 3 years. Vistacor probably feels like Raymond threw away their most trusted partner for no good reason." She was right, and that made me feel a little better about the whole situation. I hadn't set out to hurt Graypoint's business. I just wanted to be treated fairly. But apparently Vistacor had drawn their own conclusions about what my termination said about the company's values and judgment. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Kira Benson herself. "Morning, Logan. I assume you've heard about our communication to Graypoint by now. Want to be crystal clear that this decision was made independently by our board, with no input from you whatsoever. Looking forward to working with someone who values loyalty and integrity." I screenshot that text immediately and sent it to Claire. If Raymond tried to blame me for Vistacor's decision, I wanted documentation that I'd had nothing to do with it. Another text came in, this one from Tommy Rodriguez in Graypoint Security. "Dude, Mr. Ellis just called an emergency meeting. He's asking if you took any Vistacor files when you left. I told him no way. I was there when you packed up. Just wanted you to know." I laughed out loud at that one. Of course, Raymond's first instinct was to blame me for somehow sabotaging the relationship. The idea that Vistacor might have made their own independent judgment about his character and leadership abilities probably never even occurred to him. "Thanks, Tommy," I texted back. "Appreciate you having my back." The rest of the morning brought a steady stream of messages from former colleagues, each one painting a picture of chaos and panic at Graypoint. Raymond had apparently locked himself in his office with the senior partners, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Emergency calls to Vistacor had gone unanswered. Attempts to reach me through mutual contacts had been ignored. By lunchtime, the story had made its way through Seattle's tight-knit business community. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls from headhunters, former clients, and colleagues from other firms who'd heard that I was suddenly available and that my former employer was imploding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Raymond had fired me for being disloyal, and now his company was facing the consequences of that disloyalty in the most public and expensive way possible. I closed my laptop and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, savoring the bitter taste and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the universe does keep score. I hadn't asked for this to happen, hadn't planned it or orchestrated it, but I also wasn't going to feel guilty about it. Raymond Ellis had made his choice. Now he was living with the consequences. And honestly, he'd earned every bit of what was coming to him. Friday morning hit Graypoint like a freight train carrying bad news and broken dreams. My phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree with messages from people still trapped inside Raymond's corporate circus, and let me tell you, the show was getting ugly fast. Tessa Martinez, one of the few decent people left in that place, sent me a screenshot that made my coffee taste even better. "Emergency all-hands meeting." Raymond's shouting, asking who talked to Vistacor. The timestamp showed 8:47 a.m., which meant Raymond had probably been awake all night, trying to figure out how to spend $18 million walking out the door. The image showed a packed conference room, with everyone looking like they'd rather be getting root canals. Raymond was standing at the head of the table, his usually perfect silver hair looking like he'd been running his hands through it all night. Even through a blurry phone photo, you could see the desperation in his body language. "This is insane," Tessa texted. "He's acting like someone committed treason." 20 minutes later, Jared called me directly. "Dude, you need to hear this. 3 board members just cornered Raymond about your firing." Apparently Margaret Walsh, the Iron Lady herself, asked him point-blank why he terminated the cleanest record in the company over a job interview. Margaret Walsh asking questions was like the corporate equivalent of your mom using your full name. Bad things were about to happen. "What did he say?" I asked, genuinely curious how Raymond would try to justify his tantrum to people who actually understood business. Something about loyalty and company culture. Margaret just stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Then she asked if he thought Vistacor pulled their contract because they felt disrespected by how we treated their primary contact. The silence on Raymond's end must have been deafening. "Here's the best part," Jared continued, barely containing his laughter. "Tom Bradley, the guy who's been kissing Raymond's ass for 10 years, actually asked if there was a way to get you back before this got worse." That stopped me cold. Tom Bradley was Raymond's golf buddy, the guy who'd gotten that VP position despite having 0 consulting experience. If even Tom was questioning the decision, Raymond was in deeper shit than I'd realized. And I prompted. Raymond said it was too late, that bridges had been burned. Margaret looked around the room and said, "The only bridge I see burned is the one you torched when you fired our best performer for having ambition." Damn, Margaret Walsh didn't mess around when it came to protecting the bottom line, and losing a $20 million client because of ego was exactly the kind of stupidity that made her legendary temper flare up. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Claire. "Ryan just called. Dad's in full panic mode. Wants to meet with you. Offering a bonus and everything." I laughed out loud at that one. A bonus. After 5 years of denying me raises, Raymond thought he could wave some cash around and make this whole mess disappear. The man really didn't understand that this wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, something you can't buy after you've already thrown it away. "Tell Ryan I appreciate the offer," I texted back, "but I've already started with Vistacor." Which was technically true. My official start date was still a week away, but in my mind, I'd already moved on. The old Logan would have been tempted by the bonus, would have wondered if maybe Raymond had finally learned his lesson. But the new Logan, the one who'd spent a week discovering what it felt like to be valued, wasn't interested in going backward. Besides, something told me this was just the beginning of Raymond's problems. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that made my coffee taste like opportunity. Elaine Monroe, chairwoman of Gray Point's board of directors, and the kind of woman who could make grown executives wet themselves with a single raised eyebrow, wanted to meet. Not Raymond, her. Personally. "I understand you've been through quite an ordeal, Logan," she said in that crisp, no-nonsense voice that had terrified CEOs across the Pacific Northwest for 30 years. "Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I think we need to have a conversation." An hour later, I found myself sitting across from the Iron Lady herself at a quiet cafe downtown, far from Gray Point's offices and prying eyes. Elaine was exactly what you'd expect. Silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun, sharp blue suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Logan, let me be direct," she said after we'd ordered. "Raymond acted without board approval when he terminated you. That was his first mistake. His second was failing to consider how it would look to our clients." I sipped my coffee and waited. Elaine Monroe didn't call emergency meetings to make small talk. "We'd like to offer you reinstatement," she continued. "Significant salary increase, leadership position, full autonomy over your accounts. Whatever Raymond should have offered you years ago, the old me would have jumped at this. 5 years of fighting for recognition, and here it was being handed to me on a silver platter. But the new me, the one who'd tasted what it felt like to be actually wanted, just felt tired." "That's incredibly generous, Ms. Monroe," I said carefully. "But I've already accepted a position with Vistacor. I start next week." Her expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of respect in those sharp eyes. "Smart move. They're lucky to have you." She leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask what would have made you stay?" "Hypothetically." I thought about that for a moment, really thought about it. If anyone had acted like they wanted me to, I said finally. Not needed me, not tolerated me, wanted me. Like I was an asset worth investing in rather than a problem to manage. Elaine nodded slowly. Fair enough. That's exactly what I told the board this morning. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence. Two professionals who understood exactly what had gone wrong and why. When we stood to leave, she extended her hand. Good luck at VistaCore, Logan. And thank you for being honest about what happened. It's helped us see some things more clearly. I shook her hand, surprised by how final it felt. The first time I'd left Gray Point, I'd been escorted out by security. This time, I was walking away by choice, with my head held high and the respect of someone who mattered. Take care, Ms. Monroe. I hope you find what you're looking for. As I walked back to my car, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or resentful or looking for revenge. I was just done. 5 years of fighting to be valued at a place that would never value me was over. Time to build something new. My first month at VistaCore felt like stepping into a completely different universe, one where people actually gave a damn about what you had to say. No more tiptoeing around fragile egos or translating every idea through 3 layers of corporate politics. Just straight-up collaboration with people who wanted to be there. I had a team of 7 now, and man, what a difference that made. These weren't burned-out corporate zombies going through the motions. These were sharp, motivated professionals who brought ideas to the table instead of waiting for someone else to tell them what to think. Sarah Kim, my lead analyst, had this way of breaking down complex market data that made even the most boring spreadsheets tell a story. Marcus Thompson could charm the pants off the most difficult clients, and Jenny Walsh, no relation to Margaret, thankfully, had a strategic mind that could spot opportunities 3 moves ahead. We weren't just managing accounts, we were building relationships. Real ones. The kind where clients called you first when they had problems because they trusted you to find solutions, not just bill them for hours. The travel was incredible too. In 5 years at Gray Point, I'd maybe left Seattle a dozen times for business. In my first month at VistaCore, I'd been to Portland twice, San Francisco once, and had a week-long strategy session in Denver that actually resulted in actionable plans instead of corporate buzzword bingo. At the monthly leadership dinner, Kira stood up with her glass of wine and looked right at me. To Logan, she said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. Proof that knowing your worth changes everything. The applause felt different than any recognition I'd ever gotten at Gray Point. This wasn't polite corporate clapping. This was genuine appreciation from people who understood what I brought to the table. I was too stunned to speak, honestly. After 5 years of feeling invisible, having a room full of successful people acknowledge my value was overwhelming in the best possible way. Claire had been skeptical at first, not about my abilities, but about whether any company could really be that different from Gray Point. But when she visited my new office and saw the energy, saw how people interacted with each other and with me, something clicked. You were never disloyal, she said quietly as we stood in my corner office, looking out at the city lights. You were just ready for something better. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed in just a few weeks. From unemployed and uncertain to leading a team and building something meaningful. From being treated like an expendable resource to being valued as a strategic asset. The best part? This was just the beginning. For the first time in years, I could see a future that wasn't limited by someone else's small vision of what I could accomplish. 12 months later, I was sitting in my corner office at VistaCore, watching Seattle's morning fog roll off Elliott Bay, when Tessa sent me a LinkedIn message that made me smile. Thought you should know. People still talk about the day you left. You gave us courage. A year, 365 days since Raymond Ellis called me disloyal and escorted me out of his building like a common criminal. Looking back, it felt like a lifetime ago, but also like yesterday. Funny how perspective works when you're not constantly fighting just to be heard. The Gray Point Gossip Network had kept me updated on the aftermath, even though I'd never asked for it. Raymond had stepped down quietly in October, pursuing other opportunities, according to the press release, which was corporate speak for forced out by the board before he could do any more damage. Margaret Walsh had taken over as interim CEO and was apparently cleaning house with the efficiency of a military operation. They'd lost 2 more major clients after VistaCore pulled out, both citing strategic realignment and evolving partnership priorities. Translation: word got around about how they treated good people, and nobody wanted to be next. I never gloated, never posted anything smug on social media, never even mentioned Grey Point struggles when former colleagues reached out. That chapter of my life was closed, and I wasn't interested in looking backward when there was so much to build ahead. My team had grown to 12 people now. We'd landed 3 major new accounts, including one that had specifically sought us out after hearing about our innovative approach to client relationships. Kira had hinted that another promotion was coming, possibly a VP track, with equity options that would make the VistaCore dream even sweeter. Claire and I had started talking about buying a bigger house, maybe something with a view and enough space for the family. We were finally ready to start. The financial stress that had been hanging over us for years was gone, replaced by genuine excitement about what came next. Ryan texted me occasionally. Family dinners were apparently much quieter without Raymond's constant presence, and Claire's mom seemed happier too. Even family dynamics improved when you removed the toxic element that had been poisoning everything. But the message that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Marcus Webb from Hartfield & Associates, the guy whose innocent phone call had set this whole chain of events in motion, sent me a note. Just want you to know, your story made me rethink how we treat talent here. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to good people is getting fired by bad bosses. I closed my laptop and looked around my office. Photos of my team celebrating our latest win, thank you notes from satisfied clients. The view of a city full of possibilities. My name was Logan Rivers, and getting fired that Tuesday morning was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just rising, thriving, and never looking back. Sometimes it's just becoming who you were meant to be all along.